How's it going, everybody? So with everybody being stuck at home for these meetings and we can't really do any gatherings of any type, it really makes it hard to get together and do any type of hands-on stuff. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to make a video and show you guys some examples real time. So you might not be able to do it out here with me, but at least this way you'll kind of get a good idea. Well, let's get started. So when it comes to survival, it's really good as a person to have been out of your comfort zone often. And what I mean by this is the more you get outside of your comfort zone, your bubble, you experience new and different things and you learn yourself better as things like how you deal with emotions, fear, adrenaline, things like that. It also, as you work with these kind of situations, because you stretch out a little bit further than you're comfortable with, you learn how you react and how to react to those situations better, helping you make better decisions, not such rash, short thought decisions. A good acronym to remember is STOP, S-T-O-P. Stay, think, observe, plan. Now when it comes to this, it's to slow you down from just making rash decisions too quickly, right? You need to evaluate what you're looking at, what you're dealing with, and the best method to move from there. Something else to consider is whether this is a long-term or short-term problem, right? So is this going to be something you can get out of quickly? Regardless of what kind of a situation you're in, you should always set yourself short, realistic goals. By doing so, this makes you achieve these goals, which keeps you motivated moving forward. Especially if this is a longer term issue to deal with, you need that motivation to pull out of it. So in a survival situation, there's a couple things you need. The absolute basics for life, everyone's gonna think this is silly, but obviously you need things like air. You need air, you need water, you need shelter, you need fire, you need food. You need rest. Rest is really important because if you're not well rested, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to stumble, fumble. You're going to make decisions you normally wouldn't have made. You're not going to have the ability to think things out as clearly. So make sure you have good rest. And lastly, you need signal, right? To get yourself out of that situation if it's not just a matter of walking out. So let's talk about feeling equipped for a minute, right? Feeling equipped can be a misleading feeling. You have all the gear in the world, you got new stuff, cool stuff, whatever. The dangerous aspect of this isn't being equipped, it's feeling over-equipped than you are. And where this can be a problem is if you're not experienced with the equipment that you have, right? So you can have a failure to be able to use it properly because you're not experienced with it, or you could have that you brought the wrong equipment because you don't use it often, you don't realize the difference in what you did and didn't need. So you can also be over-equipped and that can bog you down too. What about the patient? Did you consider them before you took off on your assignment? Did you share gear and talk with your teammates before you headed out too? So you guys could split up so you don't need 3 first aid kits, but you do need 3 jackets, 1 for each of you, right? So you can keep your own personal gear that's not shareable, but the other things you could split up. You don't need 3 cook sets. You might be able to eliminate some of those to manage more weight or more weight management, and so you could put in other things for the patient. So if it's snowing, it's a good chance they're going to be hypothermic, or if they've been out in the rain, 24 hours or something, that might be something that you have to consider what they need as well. Something else to consider is evacuation. So as you hike in, you need to be looking at your surroundings that you're passing by, because some of these might be valuable for evac. Let's say you needed a helicopter and a landing zone. So you've seen something you passed, like this little meadow here, which is nice and open, and you could backtrack to it maybe a short ways to get somewhere where a helicopter could land. You can call them into it. However, helicopters can also drop a line inside of thicker trees than this. However, this makes it a lot safer for everybody if you're already aware of this and you don't have to waste time looking for it after the fact. You already know where it is and you marked it. So let's talk about heat retention for a minute. And that's your ability to keep your core warm or to maintain the heat that you're producing in a time where it's cold out, right? So here I have a waterproof shell on and I have a couple layers, right? And this is great. This adds my ability to shed layers off if I get too warm, right? And I can keep shedding as I go. So several layers, that works well, especially when it's really cold out, because you can really moderate your temperature, not just go from super hot to super cold, nothing in between, because you just have one big thick jacket on, right? But with heat retention, there's other things to consider as well, like how your body loses heat. There's four main ways. You have evaporation, you have conduction, convection, and you have radiation. All these things to consider, and there's a lot to understand here, but it helps you prepare for the environment that you're going to be in. So understand this. So if the air is just really frigid out, it's just cold, but it's not windy, and you don't have any layers on, right? Let's say you've gone in with your jacket in your backpack or something, right? So your skin is bare to the air. The cold is actually going to draw the heat from your skin. It's going to lower your temperature that way. Also thinking about your body radiates heat outwards as well, right? So as you work hard, your body starts to crank up the heat and the heat starts coming off your body, that radiation, okay? Humans, we radiate about 50 to 60% of our heat under a heavy workload. So imagine you got that big heavy pack on, you're hiking up a steep incline, right? You're going to be working hard and you're going to be creating the most heat. Are you going to want to trap it in then? Obviously not. But once you get to the top of that hill, your workload ends and your day is coming to an end. So the sun is setting and it's going to get even colder. Now's where it's really important to be considering heat retention and what you're going to do. So valuable is something that you would consider beforehand, before even starting your hike, like not wearing too many layers right off the bat so you don't sweat, because what's worse than being cold? Being cold and wet. So understand how your body reacts to heat and all this, and having the proper layers. So once I get to the top of the hill, before I start getting cold and I know my workload is pretty much over, I might throw on another layer or something like that. Let's talk about the different types of materials for a minute. You have insulation and you have reflective, and these are just the two main types I'm going to consider in this. When it comes to reflective materials, they tend to reflect heat that is currently being made. So if you're not producing much heat, it's not reflecting much. We're going to use Mylar in this example. Everyone knows those foil blankets. They're also 100% waterproof and they do not breathe whatsoever. So imagine like a rubber poncho, wrapped around yourself. You're going to condensate on the inside, not necessarily sweat, but you're still going to be soaked. But what is Mylar good for then? Because it's all over the place. Well, it does have a place to work. It does have a purpose. One of that is, imagine you have a fire, you have you, and then you have a reflective tarp facing you, the reflective side in, so that heat from the fire is being created when your body is not. It hits the tarp and it comes back. Now it's a low percentage, but it's still, that's what it's good for. It's reflecting heat that's currently being made. Now in this example, you're cold, so you're not creating enough heat really, right? Now you should have insulation on regardless, but this is just one way to keep more heat or reflect some more back to you. So you're maximizing, say, your fire's ability to produce heat. Okay, so you kind of get the idea of that. Now, what's the best insulative property? There is air, right? Air is absolutely the number one thing you need to focus on. The more air you can trap, and we're going to use a coined term called dead air management, or DAM. The more air you can trap, the better you are going to have at chances of keeping your heat. This is also going to come play when it comes to your patient. You're going to have to consider this as well. You want to get them dry and you want to get them warm, right? So in that, you're going to need to trap as much air you can without it just filling with moisture. Now, they're not going to be creating a bunch of heat if they're hypothermic, so there's not a ton of concern with that. Usually the more heat you make, the more condensation you make. So, but these are all things you're going to have to understand to consider when time comes. Also, think about this too when it comes to materials and the idea of things. You want to trap as much air as you can. If you put a thin layer of waterproof anything right onto your skin, you're going to feel the temperature of the ambient air, because the ambient air is actually cooling the surface of the material, and that is drawing it directly out from your skin. So you need to make sure you have a layer of trapped air in there, and that's why it's so critical. Imagine this. Right now on a cool day, you're holding a piece of steel. It's going to feel cold, and it's going to feel cold because it's actually drawing the heat from your body into it. Now you pick up a piece of wood, and now it's not going to feel nearly as cold. Now there's two different things going on here. One, the wood isn't drawing the heat from you nearly as fast as that steel is, but two, wood has more of an insulative property and steel has more of a conductive property. And every material around us is something to consider, like stone. If you lay down your camp on stone, it's going to draw the heat out from you a lot faster than if you have, trapped air or something more insulative below you, like branches and leaves and grass and pine needles, right? So you're going to eliminate that problem from underneath you. But this is just so you understand the difference in materials. All right, so let's talk about emergency shelters for a minute. There's three main considerations that I'm talking about here. You have the immediate shelter, the temporary shelter, and the long-term shelter. What I mean by this is, how long are you going to need this shelter for? And that's going to be the big consideration here. Immediate is within minutes, and then you're just going to hit the trail and keep going. Temporary is going to be for maybe a couple hours, and then you're going to take off. And then you have long-term, which is going to be overnight or maybe several nights. So when it comes to this, talking about the immediate shelter, it might be something as easy as using some rocks to shelter you, and maybe a big tree to help cover you. But think of the safety factor behind this too. Is it safer to use whatever shelter you've picked as a natural resource than it is out in the weather? Which one's going to be more dangerous or more affecting you? With his considerations would be like if the tree is laden with snow and that snow could collapse down on you, and or if it's a rock overhang, the chances that it could fall and break apart. Is this a safe place to be in whatever the situation is you're in? So when it comes to a temporary shelter, something that you're going to be there for a couple hours, and I would actually apply this to the immediate one as well, is if you could set up a simple tarp shelter. Just something to give you a little bit of an overhang. You can string it between a couple trees or bushes or whatever, and just for something fast, right? Now, you could also consider the tarp shelter for something a little longer term as well. So a lot of these kind of blend back and forth, but you could also consider a tent a long-term shelter, and or you could build a natural shelter, say a wooden lean-to, with a bunch of brush and sticks and things up the back. That would be for much more substantial things like heavy snow load or whatever, and it would really do good at blocking the wind. However, it's going to take a lot of resources, a lot of time to set up, so you better be there for a long while and really need that, because it's going to be a big effort to do that. A tent or a tarp is going to be a lot less effort. However, you are going to have to haul those with you. So if you didn't plan to have to spend the night, you're obviously not going to have a tent with you, but you might have a tarp. So let's go look for a shelter. Here we go. This will work. So I can use this tree, that tree, and possibly that one. Maybe something over here. Nice open area. I could do a fire here. Have a big tarp. We're gonna set up. Okay, so as you can see, I have my shelter set up. The considerations I took for this was trees to tie to, but even more so, I have a hill that goes downhill here and uphill here. More than likely, if the wind comes from the front, it's going to go over me. Most likely, the wind is going to come up from behind me, so I set my wall to protect me from that. This is quite a big shelter. I could fit probably 4 people here, including my patient. And that's something you got to consider too. Are you equipped or prepared to deal with your patient being with you? Because they probably aren't. That's why they're in there the first place. So this will work as a good large shelter. You could also go, I could fold this down and make it just an A-frame. I could do that too. However, for ease of access, this works great. We'll lay out our tarp, our second tarp on the bottom for our sleep system, and we can do a fire pit right here in front so some of that warm air kind of scoops back into the tarp. Okay, so here's another idea too when it comes to survival. Most of you have probably heard of the plastic bag, the trash bag idea. Really, when it comes to survival, this can be a really good thing. I can do all kinds of stuff. If your bag's thick enough, I can collect all my kindling and stuff for my fire in one shot and bring it over if you have a heavy duty contractor's bag. Also, I can make this an emergency shelter. I can cut it open, I can put a rock inside of it, tie a rope around that, and now I have a tie-off point, because if you just poke a hole through it, it's gonna rip through. Or you can wrap yourself in it, poke holes in it, just stick your arms out, use it like a poncho, obviously make a head hole. Another thing you can do with a plastic bag like this is you can fill it with debris. This makes a great bed. So if I want to insulate myself from the ground, this could be an awesome way to do this. Now, I might not have enough immediately in the area where I'm sleeping to just rake into a pile to be sufficient. So I might have to go gather it and bring it. One of these is going to make that, so I can just keep gathering as I go and not make 20 trips back to camp with just as much as my hand can carry. So these plastic bags can come in super handy when it comes to that. Okay, so I have my bag of leaves here. I have it laid down. It's not completely full because this is just for example's sake. This creates an air cushion between me and the ground and a little bit more comfort as well. I did not bring a sleep pad, so what little room one of these plastic garbage bags can take up can do a lot. Now, if you're in the snow, this isn't going to work as good, right? It might, but it's more than likely not, because the leaves will be buried way down deep below you. But in just a cold or rainy environment, this could work great for you. So I lay my bag down under me. I take my tarp, lay it over that. I keep mine folded in half because I'm going to use it kind of like a blanket. So I have a actual blanket, not a sleeping bag here. I'm going to open up, I'm going to lay out inside and sandwich that in, and I'll be in the middle of all of that. I also have an emergency bivvy, which is just that mylar material. I'm going to choose not to use it unless I absolutely need it because I'm worried about the condensation on the inside of it. Although I could, because it is a sleeping bag, I could undo it and use it just as a blanket over the top of everything. But also consider, are you only prepared for you or you and a patient? And how do you set up for having a patient with you? My personal opinion is I would put them at the back here underneath. They're more than likely going to need to move the least amount if they're too injured or anything, and this keeps them the most protected. I would want to be closer to the outside of the tent so I could manage, say, if I have a fire going or if I'm making food for us, and also to stay near them so I can maintain medical if I have to check on vital signs or anything like that. Also, which should lead into how you protect them and cover them up. You need to maintain the ability to check stuff like, temperature, pulse, and so on. Whatever the injury is, you should be able to access if, say, it's a wound or something like that. So for when it comes to fire making, you got to ask yourself, do you need a fire? Is this for your life or for your comfort? In my situation, it's a glorious day. It's warm out. I definitely don't need a fire. Am I going to want a fire later tonight? Possibly. I'm going to want one. Am I going to need it? No. So I don't need to expend all that energy as well on wasting time collecting wood, making a fire pit, yada yada. I can just go with the stuff I have in my backpack for making, boiling water or whatever it is. I have a cook stove that's much easier and more efficient. For example's sake, though, I'm going to set up a fire ring and show you kind of some of the methods though. Okay, so as you can see here, I kind of have this horseshoe shape, the tallest rocks on the back and kind of open at the bottom for the air to flow in, although clearing out everything that can burn so the fire doesn't burn outwards. But what you want is somewhere for the air to go in easily, especially when you have a wet, damp environment. You're going to need everything working for you, not against you. Okay, so we've got our fire pit made. Now we just need some wood to fill it. Now before you go out and run and grab everything off the ground you can, it's good to consider what you're looking for first. First of all, you want upright dead wood. Anything that's standing upright, that's dead. Not stuff that just has no leaves on it, as most of the oaks around me have no leaves because it's winter and they're dormant. So I need to look for something that actually is dead so it burns. In a wet environment, whether it's been raining or is raining, upright is going to be the driest stuff you can find. So make sure if it's a tree that's fallen over, the branches that are sticking upright, those are what you want to look for. Now anything that's laying on the ground or that's laying horizontal to the ground is going to retain a lot more water. There's a lot more surface area for that water to absorb into. So even though the surface might not feel too wet, the minute you cut into it, it's soaked because it's been sitting there absorbing over time. So the best thing you can do is have a pack saw or something. So anything upright you can chop off. Maybe you have a hatchet or something like that. Although I prefer a pack saw myself. They're a lot lighter and they can cut much bigger wood. You can do logs. And if you can cut a flat end off of it, you can also split the log with a pocket knife or something. All you have to do is take your pocket knife out, run it here, and baton the end of it with another stick. So you lay it up there and you baton down on the tip, and that'll actually split the wood. You can keep doing that over and over, making finer and finer stuff with just a pocket knife. The nice thing is the inside of that wood is going to be drier than anything you're going to pick up off the ground. So make sure you take your time into preparing your fire, otherwise you're going to fail at making it and you're going to be really frustrated. Patience is the key with fire making. Also, when it comes to fire making, something you want to think about is beard, finger, and wrist, right? And these refer to the size of the logs and stuff you should be looking for. So like this is finger, right? This would be kindling, and it has a nice snap to it. That means we're dry in the middle. If it bends or it doesn't break completely, it's not completely dry. It's a waste of your time more than likely. You might use it for drawing out on the fire later, but not to get it started. You can use a bigger piece and split it. You can shave it. You can, if you have a pocket knife, you can make fine shavings, but also pine needles, stuff on the ground. This works as beard, right? Fine stuff works as beard, which is fire starter as well. You want to have a substantial amount of this beard stuff, real fine shavings of stuff, and finger size stuff. Go more than you think you need. You're almost guaranteedly going to need all of it. And then when it comes forth through the night, you have to consider, how long is this fire going to run for? Are you shivering? Is this going to be an all-night thing? Is it freezing out? Because you're going to spend the night waking up, feeding the fire, resting a little bit, waking up, feeding the fire, resting a little bit, and you're not going to want to get out of your sleeping bag to go hunt down more wood. So do it now. Prepare in advance, preferably before it's dark while you can still find this stuff. Okay, so when it comes to making a fire, lay something down. The idea here is I need the opening so I can feed it, and all this is going to start to catch fire, heat up, and burn. Get a pile over your V and start your pile here so you can lay it over your fire, but not yet. Now I'm going to not shove it deep in there, just so it just barely is. And you remember, you should have 3 methods of fire making, right? First of all, I do have a half flare. This is a signaling flare, and I could easily use that, but this would waste if I needed it as a signal, so I'm not going to go to that yet. I do have matches, and this, which is wet fire, which will burn in water. It really doesn't care. It's solid state fuel. take a match, you can light that. And here I've a couple Bic lighters, that's 3. So we can start with just the Bic lighter, and you can use other things to help it, like if you have dryer lint or maybe Vaseline impregnated cotton balls or whatever it is. Those don't start the fire. This is the fire, right? So you just need something to light. Also, what's a great method to have is a candle. You light the candle and you set it there. As long as it's not too windy, you have a continuous burning flame to mess with this and not just expend your lighter. Now is the point, I don't want to suffocate it, but I want to try and get that stuff lit as well. So I can slowly start to roll it over, but I'm just watching it for now. Now remember, when it comes to fire making, the entire concept of this isn't because it's easy to make, is that you're in an emergency situation, and this is probably going to be harder than on a warm summer's day. So what you need to focus on is a bed of coals, which you need to be very patient with. Once you get a bed of coals started, the whole thing gets easier from there. So don't jump on trying to throw your big logs or whatever on it. You need to start slow first. Get a slow coal going and have a ton of small sticks to continuously feed it until you have a self-sustaining small little fire that just the coals will reignite whatever new you introduce to it. But a couple other things you can do is you can set your logs and things up, hopefully in a manner that's safe, for them to dry around the fire. Now, they should be far enough away they're not going to burn, but close enough that you'll see steam coming off of them as they're drawing out, and then you can lay them into your fire as you wish to use them. Now, when it comes to your sleep system, there's a couple things you can do for keeping more heat if you didn't have enough insulative properties with you, say your jacket, your sleeping bag, an extra tarp, a foil blanket. If all that isn't enough, a couple things you can do. One, if you're near a fire, if you're an arm's length or so, or maybe a little further back, you can use the rocks. Strategically plant rocks close enough to the fire where they don't get scalding hot and you can touch them, and they don't melt your sleeping bag or the tarp you're on. But you can use those, and you can cuddle them in the middle of the night. I know this sounds weird, but actually they radiate so much heat. They do a pretty good job, although they don't last forever. They might last an hour or two. So you'll want a backup rock, and you'll kind of swap the two out throughout the night. Now, this isn't just for comfort. This is more of to keep you alive for a dangerous situation. Otherwise, I wouldn't really recommend this. You can also heat water up in your water bottle, and you can use that and keep the water with you. And this serves two good purposes. One, keeps your water from freezing if it's a really cold night, because you don't want your water to freeze. But two, you can use it to heat the water and that to keep you warm, and you just have to continuously do that through the night. One other thing you can do is if you have a hand warmer, you can shove that down into your sleep system with you. And for a few hours, those things work pretty good to just put out a little bit of heat, but that'll change the degrees of your sleeping bag just enough to maybe help you get some rest. Now, lastly, something you can do also is to eat high-calorie foods. This will actually boost your internal furnace. The more that you have to digest, the harder your body works. You actually bump up your core temperature. Now, you can do this just before you go to bed. I prefer to do it somewhere in the middle of the night so I have something to use, because usually as I get in bed, I'm really warm. I get too warm. I have to open the sleeping bag up, even in the snow for me, close it back up, and then I finally pass out, and then I go cold. And that's when I'll usually go for like a hand warmer, or I'll eat something and then go back to sleep, and I'm good the rest of the night. Okay, let's talk cook kits for a minute. The one I have is this little titanium cook kit. It's pretty small. It weighs probably a pound with the fuel and everything. And to each their own. There's a million different versions of these, but I just want to kind of go over the main idea. Now, what I have here is a stand for my fuel canister that just makes the entire thing more stable, because this ends up being a little bit tall. Inside my pot, I have my burner, which is in this little baggie. I have a couple backup lighters that are separate, a windbreak, which is just foil so I can surround this if it's windy, and then the fuel canister itself, which is a mixed fuel. And this just snaps down onto there, giving it some legs. We'll screw this on, try and make it as level as I can. And then my pot has some different methods of holding it. It has handles here. It also has a method to hang it from a rope over the fire pit. And then all we need is water, but there's measurements in there, so we'll fill it with however much water we need. And then we're going to light the lighter first, cover the top, and let it do its thing. Now, when it comes to these cook kits, there's a bunch of different versions of these. Different fuels, that's probably the biggest one, and there's a variety of different stove burners and systems as well. When it comes to these multi-fuel canisters or dual fuel canisters, these are great for being in different elevations, and they're really good for wind resistance. If it gets really windy out, these do the best, although you can blow them out. Now there's always the liquid fuel, like plain liquid fuel you put into these little canisters that have holes around the top, and you light them, and those work really great at really high altitudes, but they're really terrible when it comes to wind. Now, why are those better than these in the really cold high altitude? One, these take a lot more oxygen to burn, and two, these canisters, as you use it, it's already actually getting cold to the touch right now. Now, if we were in the snow, this canister would actually frost over, and it would stop the gas from coming out, and eventually I wouldn't be able to use it. Liquid fuel stoves, you just pour the liquid in, light it, and it burns. Those have no issue with that whatsoever, but you can't see the flame. It's very clear on those. This, I can tell it's on because I can hear it. But on the liquid canisters, if it blows out, you really don't even know that it's blown out, which is kind of a bummer. You could also use things like, the fire or whatever, but these by far, bang for the buck. One of these little canisters, I can go several days off of one of these canisters for a few days. So it means for an outing, I could easily support me and teammates and a patient off this one canister without problem. Now, if we were going multiple days, you might need a little bigger or a backup canister, but that's no worries. These are fairly small and light. Now, when it comes to these little gas stove canister kits, below about 5,000 or 6,000 foot elevation, you can probably boil water in them in about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. If you go higher than that, it can take a little bit longer, maybe, 6 minutes to 8 minutes. Now, as you can see, we're already boiling. We are already good to cook, and I'm not lying to you, it's probably been a minute and a half. Okay, so now we're gonna shut it off here. For today, we're gonna eat this chili mac and beef. This is just a freeze-dried meal. There is a lot in this. It's very light, but then you add the water to it, and this turns into a very full meal. Sometimes hard to eat if you're not super hungry. Calories, this one has 230 for partial and 460 for the whole pack. Now, when you're out backpacking and working hard, you actually need the calories, so this isn't a bad thing. You just tear the top to this, you pour the water in, and you eat it after about 5 or 10 minutes of letting it soak. And that's pretty much it. All right, let's talk about water purification for a minute. So you should have at least 3 different methods of purifying water. And why do you need this? Because if you ran out of water because it was a long hike in, or maybe you need to help purify water for the subject. So this only helps if you come across a stream or a source that you can utilize, and it might be a bit too sketchy just to use that water right off the bat. There might be pathogens, there might be bacteria, stuff in that water you can't see that's going to make you very, very sick. So 3 main methods you can use is 1, a filter system, 2, you could use something like iodine, and 3, you could boil water. So this is my water purification kit. It's a Ziploc bag to keep everything clean. And inside of it, my filter setup basically is a bag that I use to fill up in the stream, and then I have a filter. I fill the bag up, I hook the filter on, and then there's a straw that goes on the end of that to stick into my bottle, and then you squeeze the bag, it forces it through the filter into your bottle or whatever it is. Also, it filters out all the sediment and everything, as well as a lot of the bacteria and things too. Read the labels on these or go to the manufacturer to find out exactly what each of the individual filters you look into are good for. Also, you can use iodine, right? Iodine tablets or liquid iodine. Iodine does not taste very good. So if you have some sort of a flavor preference, you could add in some water flavoring with one of these to kind of make it more palatable. But I mean, in a life or death situation, it's not that big of a deal. It's not going to kill you. The taste isn't absolutely horrid. It's just not great. Also, if you're boiling water or using iodine, that is not removing any of the sediment from that water. So if there are particulates in the water that you can see, it's not going to get rid of that. So you might want to use something to filter it out in advance before you boil it or whatever. So use, say, a cloth of some sort, cover over the lid and pour it through that. Okay, so something else to consider is a bathroom. Where are you or everyone else going to go? You need to set up a community bathroom so we can keep any contamination confined to one general place. Some things to consider here is if this is my trail in, my camp is set up here, and over here I have a creek, and I really do have a creek right here. I don't want to be within 200 feet of a creek, or my camp, or my trail. So looking at those, you have to judge where's the best place to put a bathroom. And you're going to want to well mark it so there's no accidents, nobody walks through it on an accident or anything like that. And it's easy to find, so when people got to go, it's not too difficult. But I would choose this way, about 200 feet out, so it's going downhill from camp, and it's away from the trail, and it's far away from the water source. Now, when it comes to doing this, you're going to want to dig a minimum of a 6-inch deep hole. We call those cat holes. However, you can go deeper than 6 inches as well, especially if you're going to have multiple people using this or for a longer period of time. You might want to go to 1 foot to 2 feet if possible. Using the materials around you like sticks and rocks to help dig could be a big savior in this. If it's possible, that is. So go 1 foot deep. Then what you can do is over time, or as each person uses it, they kick some soil in over it, and it just makes the smell more subsided, and it's a little more polite for each individual who goes there to use it. Now, once you're done with this and you guys are going to permanently leave your camp, you're going to want to completely bury it in all the way to the top with as much dirt as you can and place rocks over that, keeping any animals out so you don't also infect any of the environment as well. Okay, let's talk about sanitization for a minute. Although it seems kind of silly, but it is really important here, especially after using the bathroom. You want to make sure you have like either hand wipes or some sort of like Purell or even water to rinse your hands off and wash up before you go back to camp and do anything, because you don't want to cross-contaminate other equipment and then somebody else could pick that up. 2, if you end up with some sort of a stomach virus or anything like that, there's a really good chance that it probably ended up being from poor personal care or sanitization after using the bathroom. All right, everybody, I hope this was some value to you. You got something out of it, whether you've done this a million times or whether this is your first time. From there, I'm going to end the video here. I have a hike out. I actually got to go to work, so I got to get out of here. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and let's talk about it. See you in a minute.